You wrote the piece of basically saying, okay, the financial parts, players want this, fine. But what about fixing the game itself to make it more, filled with action, entertainment, excitement, all the things that we have grievances about, the way the game's deteriorated. So tell us about this. I mean, I thought it was a great angle to take when everyone else is huffing and puffing over the actual financial parameters of this.
Well, I mean, I would say if you're a season ticket holder or even somebody who goes to a game or two a year, you're not as concerned about, whether players get arbitration in year 2 or year 3 or whether salaries have declined over the past few years. And I get why those are major issues for the Players Association. But I think if you're that guy as a season ticket holder or going to a couple of games a year, you want an interesting product to consume. You want to pay your money knowing that you're going to go to the ballpark and be fulfilled for your dollar and for your time and for your emotions. And we know what has happened statistically to the game over the past decade or more. This year was the first time since 2007, I think I have that right, in which strikeout rate has actually gone down. There was a period of about 13 straight seasons where baseball annually set a record for the most strikeouts ever in the history of the sport. Batting average this year across the league was 244. That's the lowest since 1972, when it was also 244, and you have to go back to 1968, which people in St. Louis would appreciate, the year of the pitcher, Bob Gibson and company, to find a lower batting average than that. And while I know, batting average is not a great tool to evaluate an individual player, it's an excellent tool to say, how much action is there? Are there base runners? Are people doing interesting things with balls in play? The game is out of balance. The balance is in favor of pitchers that are armed with unprecedented velocity, who are being asked to do less than ever because starters don't pitch as deep into games and you don't see a lineup a third time around. And then you bring in these giant 98-mile-an-hour slider monsters for an inning at a time, and everything is tilted to suppress action. So I get the financial part of it, and I understand why it's important. I think the fan, and I think that baseball, both of these sides, need to understand that once the finances are sorted out, you better dig in on the product you're producing, or you're going to alienate people even further.
It's such a great observation, and I'm gonna actually borrow, maybe even steal your idea, but I promise no plagiarism. But the way you, I will. With this way you laid it out, I mean, and you made the point that like all the stuff that they're going to haggle over. In terms of the compensation system or whatever, to use your phrase, I mean, these are like line item matters, the kind of things politicians do, line item things in a budget, and that always gets taken care of. But what happens when that deal is made, and if the game, to your point, remains the same, and it's not reformed and made more entertaining with more action? I mean, at this point, I get excited just to watch singles, because the singles have been the thing disappearing from the game slowly but surely. So, but do you get the sense, Barry, that because the intensity of this so far, and I anticipate the intensity will be, between the players and the owners, the financial stuff, that doing something to fix the game will become an afterthought, and it really won't be tended to properly right away?
Well, I would say this, Bernie. I mean, over the summer, I talked to Theo Epstein, former general manager of the Cubs and Red Sox, who famously broke curses in two places, and he joined the commissioner's office as a consultant to really dig in to what I would argue is a bigger issue than breaking any curse for any fan base. Kind of fixing what's wrong with the game. And I'm going to be parroting a lot of stuff that Theo has talked about from that chair, kind of subtly. He's not going to trumpet his own work, but that lack of balance, we as a baseball fan, you grow up knowing, what does being a 300 hitter mean? What does being a 230 hitter mean? What does being a 244 hitter? To me, when you grew up, a 244 hitter is kind of a mediocre hitter, right? Well, in 2021, it's actually an average hitter. So you have to, it causes this whole adjustment in your brain because the game is so out of balance. That's a long-winded way to say Theo Epstein and others at Major League Baseball are really digging in on these problems. And they did experiment, and today's piece didn't get into this because it's a little bit more of a labor piece, but I've written about it before, and a lot of people have written about it, that they're trying things in the minor leagues. And they did some test cases at various levels this year with larger bases and with pitch clocks and with automated strike zones and with banning the shift. And so they're trying to get a feel for what is real, what is really impacting the lack of action. And I think as they came out of those experiments, and I've asked around with execs and folks like that, what do you think really is going to work here? You come away with the idea that an aggressive pitch clock for pitchers is really going to have an impact because they've got to collect themselves. They've got to, in 15 seconds, throw another pitch. They don't have this whole time to, gather themselves, reset physically, and that might tilt the balance back toward the hitter a little bit. I think the automated strike zone is definitely coming. With the automated strike zone, you can adjust it so that you take away that high rising four-seamer that so many guys use to get swinging strikes or called strikes high in the zone. You take away that slider that dives out of the zone at the bottom and adjust it to favor the hitter again. In 68, that year of the pitcher, everybody knows that they lowered the mound the following year to 10 inches. That was a uniform change, but they also tweaked the strike zone there. That's very, very important. And then lastly, the thing that keeps coming around is, can you negotiate into the CBA that the roster can only contain 12 pitchers? By doing that, you're actually asking each of those 12 pitchers to do more, and that might again tilt the balance back to offense and back to a little bit more action. So again, long-winded way of saying, I think right now the economic arguments are overriding everything. That's not to suggest there aren't people who are working really hard at getting to the core elements of what's wrong with the product on the field.
I would encourage our listeners, like I'm a digital subscriber to the Post and primarily for the sports coverage, which is excellent. It's not only local but national, but everything else that comes with it, of course, keeping up with the politics, culture, you name it. I would encourage, though, you even if you're not a subscriber, you're allowed to go in there and have a certain number of free reads. Go there today. I mean, the headline, just click on the sports. The headline is "Baseball's Lockout is about economics. What needs to be fixed is the sport." That's Barry's column today. So just go ahead and when you got my permission to stop listening to the show, by the way. Go read it now. It's good stuff. So a couple other things real quick. Do you? It's an unfair question. I just asked Derek Gould this too.
Yeah.
What will be the tipping point? The one issue that probably is the most important issue. What has to be settled? If there's one thing absolutely that has to be settled before the players, especially, but the players and owners move to the middle and find a way to shake hands on this.
Oh, man.
I know. It is an old man answer.
Yeah, no, it's hard. And that's the thing. I mean, Bernie, I think part of the problem, and I think Derek would probably agree with this, is that the way these negotiations work and have worked is that each side is so interested in winning each point. And so if you say, okay, we're the players, we want the universal DH, that's a check for us. What ownership is saying, or the league is saying, what do we get back for that? And it's just this kind of trading off thing, instead of and I'm evading your question. I'm very aware that I'm evading your question, but instead of asking, there's no one there, and there's no collective effort to say what's best for the health of our sport. And I say that both economically and on the field. So I get why players are concerned that average salary has dropped, whatever it is, the last 4 seasons straight. I get, and that's in an era, aside from the pandemic year when revenues have generally gone up. I very much understand the player's side of things. To me, if I am going to answer your question, I'm probably going to say it's got to be some sort of overhaul as to when these players get paid. If management has figured out that it's no longer worth it to spend X million dollars a year on a 35, 36-year-old outfielder because you can get that production or better from a 22, 23-year-old, zero service time person and pay them the minimum salary, then I do think there's a lot of legitimacy to the players saying, okay, you guys have figured out a system that's better for the construction of your roster and for your economics. We need to move some money earlier into particularly the best guys, the best 0 to 3 guys, earlier into their careers. So that's probably what I would settle on.
No, I mean, that was great. And if it means something to you, and I think it does, because you admire Derek Gould as much as I do. That's exactly what that's what he said too. I mean, that was that's what he came down on. So
good. I'm glad.
No, it's great. By the way, before we say goodbye, because I don't want to keep you too long. Great line. Well, you quote an MLB executive, unnamed, which is okay too, talking about the situation Major League Baseball is in, which is becoming more boring and boring and boring. You quoted him or her as saying, "quote This is slow, like climate change. We're on our way to becoming hockey." I think that just nails it right there.
I hadn't thought of either of those phrases, and this guy came up with it back to back, and I was like, I wish I could write it myself, but I don't want to steal it. So, but it's right. It's a drip situation, and I love hockey, and I have nothing against hockey, and I even wrote it in the column. It's not really a swipe at the sport at all, but any self-aware hockey person understands that sport doesn't drive the national sporting discussion. Very, very, very rarely does it do that. I think baseball is certainly ahead of it with people like Shohei Ohtani and that kind of thing. It's still ahead of hockey in terms of being a niche sport, but the sentiment is correct. You've got to be aware now, before the polar ice cap melts, that things are changing.
Heck, even hockey, which, as you know, maybe for the longest period of time was reluctant to change anything, and they did overcorrection of sorts. After that era where we were delighted in St. Louis to watch Brett Hall score 90 goals and all that.
Sure.
And all of a sudden hockey stopped scoring because of the neutral zone trap. And, hockey basically said, well, we're going to have to do away with that. We're going to have to insist that, that trap's not going to be like a permanent part of every single shift, every single game. And they did. And, scoring in the NHL has been on the rise ever since. I mean, so since we were on the subject of hockey, it's like the NHL has actually shown that it can be done, within the parameters of their competition. So, there is hope, but go ahead. I'm sorry, sir.
Well, no, not at all. But I think you're right. And I think that, baseball has a reputation for being against change. And, there are sacred numbers. 90 feet between the bases has always been the beautiful balance of, okay, a ball in the hole at shortstop, like a fast runner might be able to beat it out, an average runner maybe not. What's the guy's arm? That all is such a beautiful balance. I think that the sport is at a point where you have to consider, is 60 feet 6 inches absolutely, is that arbitrary or is that sacred? You've got to be open. That doesn't mean move the mound back for sure. But I think there are no bad ideas right now. And the sports that are the most successful, which right now I think is inarguably the NFL and the NBA, have shown a greater willingness to adjust. The NBA was a brawl fest in the mid-'90s with those Knicks and Pistons teams, and they opened it up. They figured out a way to adjust. The NFL understands that offense sells, so every sort of rules tweak has to do with protecting the quarterback and allowing receivers to get downfield. Baseball has to be open to change that might seem radical, but that's, staying the same is not an option. Staying the same is going to continue to again, melt that polar ice cap and move it further to being a niche sport.
Well, this is great stuff, and I really enjoyed visiting with you on this. And I know that there's going to be more and more emphasis on this, but now it's going to be sort of blocked out for a while because the concentration will be on the squabbling and the point and counterpoint and everything else. But Barry, I really appreciate your time today, and it was just great stuff. I mean, the column was great, so thanks for that.
Thanks, Bernie. I really appreciate you having me, and take care of Derek and everybody out there. It's always one of my favorite places to come because of how good at baseball and good at sports writing and good at newspaper town it's been.
Yeah, I know. We always loved you when you came in, and for those, especially those big postseason series. And by the way, Derek, I was neglected to tell you this as I was saying goodbye to Derek, which was only a couple minutes before you came on. He told me to say hello, so I did it. So thanks, Barry.
You conveyed the message. That's great. Thanks, Bernie.
Absolutely. And happy holidays to you. We'll talk down the road. I look forward to it. Thank you so much. That is our friend from the Washington Post, Barry Svrluga, and I always mispronounce his name. It's a tough name. I think I got a tough last name. Miklasz, people have said that, a million ways. Usually the most popular way to mispronounce it. And by the way, I never take exception to that because I get it. People will always put a SKI on the end of it. Oh yeah, is this Bernie Mikowski? And I'm like, well, where do you see an SKI? But that's all right. It's tough. It's tough. In fact, I've known Barry for a long time, but it's not like I call out in the press box, hey, Svrluga, it's like Barry, right? And it occurred to me, I'm not even sure if I know how to pronounce his last name properly. So Matt Rocchio made sure, and I think Barry's used to that too. Now, how do you pronounce your last name again? He's great, though. His columns are terrific. Whether he's writing about the Nationals, the Capitals, the Redskins, or Washington football team, and of course the Wizards and major issues. I should have asked him about Bradley Beal next time. All right, we need to take a break here. That was great, man. We gave you about an hour of this, and I don't think that I don't think of again this almost full hour we spent on the CBA stuff. I don't think it was, maybe I'm wrong, and you can tell me, and that's okay. I don't think it was just like one big gust of hot air with the owners are this, the players are that, pox on both their houses, to hell with them. It was I thought it was a really intelligent discussion both times, and I love Derek Gould's breakdown of this, of what really matters in the financial part. And I love Barry's column, and you all, I know, totally sign on with what he's saying. When they sign off on a financial deal and they have to get back to playing baseball, it's like, is there a chance that baseball itself as an entertainment vehicle and a sport will become more interesting and entertaining? Because it seems to me there's two big problems to solve. One will be the financial part to the satisfaction of both sides. But to the satisfaction and happiness and entertainment value in terms of the fans, your customers, the people who subscribe, whether it be MLB TV digital subscription or a local cable subscription or a direct TV subscription, the people that pay that way and also pay by buying tickets down to the ballpark and getting concessions and all that. Well, what's the game? What are you going to do for them? You know, what are you going to do to make their investment in your sport more entertaining and worthwhile? Because if you don't fix that part of it, you know, there's going to be a point where you're just going to keep losing fans. Well, you already are, but I mean more and more and more fans. Hey, man, a lot of fans are hanging in there. Baseball attendance is still great. But gosh almighty, if you have a bloody CBA brawl that really, really alienates a lot of your fans or people that used to be fans and you hope to get back, if you do that and then come back and the game is still as boring as could be, you know, what? Geez, I mean, you think you're going to grow your business that way? Of course not. So that's I really enjoyed the nature of the two conversations we just had this hour. I really, truly did.